How does small business move forward in these historic times, particularly if that small to medium-sized business is led by a woman? So for a female perspective, a uniquely female perspective on the challenges that women entrepreneurs are facing, we say hello to the founder of M and Company, Erica Ehm, joining us from her back deck, I believe, in Toronto. And Erica, let's just dive in and talk about this. Since the pandemic, what are you noticing? What are you seeing about are there some specific challenges that women entrepreneurs have to wrap their head around in order to lead their way through this crisis?
Well, there is. I mean, there is a distinct weight on women's shoulders right now, where women who are often the main breadwinner in their family are now also the main domestic worker in the house. So there is a very much an unfair weight on women right now. Women who have many high-powered jobs are working from home, and for some reason, the kids are under the woman's domain right now, and as well as the cooking and the cleaning. So there definitely are issues right now with women who are business owners or high-ranked officials in any sort of capacity, who are now relegated to being mom again, just because of the old societal mores.
Well, as you and I were chatting just before we hopped on, and these are unedited, unscripted conversations, as you know, are there certain specific things that anyone watching right now has to be aware of to help strike that balance?
I think it's up to women to have frank conversations with their partners and realign the inner workings of a family. We are, as you said, in historic times. And what does that mean? It means that all bets are off. Whatever worked before in the old world, which was 3 months ago, is no longer relevant for today's world. And working women need to change the way things are going. Now, initially, no one had any concept that we would have to be stuck at home for so long, that there would be no school, that you wouldn't be able to go out and get groceries quickly. So the domestic demands have increased tenfold, at least. So the lines have to be shifted a bit, and new domestic rules need to be written.
I can't help but think you're an in-demand speaker. You've run a very successful digital marketing agency. Erica, are there specific things that other women are telling you that are helping them sort of navigate through all this murky water?
No, they're not telling me what they are doing. They're telling me that they're drowning and that they feel it's unfair right now, and that they don't know where to turn, because we all have built, those of us who have kids and who run businesses, we have built a team of people to help us. We have people who clean our homes, for example. We have people who take care of our kids, schools where our kids go to learn, activities where our kids go to burn off energy, offices where we go to earn money. All of that is gone. And it is now on our shoulders. Now, not to say that men are not involved, but just traditionally, it still falls on the women. So now women are trying to run their businesses, and most of businesses are at a deficit right now. So the stress is incredible. Kids who are at home are stressed out. They're unhappy. They can't go out and play. They have no social interaction, and school is a mess. And if these people are in a marriage, so if there are two people, I imagine there's not much romance happening these days, where people are locked up in a home with financial challenges and lots of stress, and kids who are everywhere. So I think that's the reality. Are there solutions? Like I said, people have to have frank conversations and figure out what the new rules are going to be.
And in that spirit, what I love about talking to you on this subject, Erica, is you're in the trenches. This is the life that you're living as well. So, where do you see, despite all this, and I hear what you say, I love that line. All bets are off. So where do you think the quote unquote new normal is in terms of striking that balance?
I actually have no idea. I have no idea because we're making the rules as we go, as we discover more. I mean, we're only being given information on a weekly basis to know what our future is going to be. The government is in a really tough position right now because this is, when we say unprecedented, I've never used that word with so much deep meaning before. Nobody knows what the hell is going on. And it's not because the government isn't doing a good job. It's because nobody knows what's going on. I mean, this hasn't ever been written before. So what are my recommendations? What do I think that's going to happen? I don't know what's going to happen. I think what people need to be, we need to have frank conversations with our, circle of family or our working partners and be very upfront about our situations and frank about our mental health. I think that we need to listen to the government, I think, in order for the craziness and the virus to slow down so that we can slowly open up. And if we open up, then we can have caregivers come and help us. I mean, you can't even have a babysitter anymore. And moms can't leave the house to go to work because there's no one to watch their kids. It's a mess right now. Do I know what's going to happen? I have no idea, but something's going to blow because we can't sustain this.
Erica, I can't help but think about, this is, you're right, unprecedented, and words like pivot suddenly became business buzzwords in what, 6 weeks, something like that. What I'm trying to ascertain, is there any thread you're seeing that sparks new creative thought? Because typically the pattern that I've been witnessing in a lot of conversations is that if the mindset is somehow shifted towards something more hopeful, that kind of unleashes creativity. Any
Absolutely.
thoughts on that?
I'm seeing innovation everywhere. I mean, just for me, my favorite thing is that I think it was about 2 weeks after the pandemic hit that doctors were given permission to practice telehealth. So we have had the technology for all these years, but for whatever governmental reason or financial reasons, they wouldn't let doctors practice medicine virtually. So now that door is open. There are many of those kinds of scenarios now which make life easier. The fact that online shopping has become much easier, grocery shopping, etc. Companies are doing their best to pivot and adapt to make things a little more easy for us to live in these crazy times. I spoke today, I was hired by an agency to work with up and coming businesses and to give them advice. So the business that reached out to me were 3 high school students who have such a great idea. They want to do peer-to-peer tutoring. And the kids who tutor get community hours, which is important in order to graduate in Ontario. You need a certain number of these community hours, which you can't get because you can't leave the house. And there are so many students who are suffering academically because public school system is not able to really accommodate all the different learning styles, and people are getting left behind. So these kids have come up with an actual platform, peer-to-peer tutoring and mentoring student to student. And those are the kinds of things that I find really exciting because this would help parents an awful lot. Almost like virtual babysitting to some degree. So those are the kinds of things which are interesting. I saw a woman who is, she's a psychology student, and she has offered, and she's not charging any money at this point, but she's doing reading circles for kids. So you could take your kid, plunk them in front of Zoom, and she's reading stories to children all over and showing the pictures, etc. So, okay, that's a little bit of babysitting, gives mom a little bit of time off.
Erica, as I hear you, I think about right away the word that popped in is reinvention. And I know you went through your own personal reinvention. So many Canadians know you from Much Music, your days on television, with, you know, Steve Anthony, Kim Clark Champness, and Laurie Brown and everybody else. Love to know your own personal insights on reinvention, because there was a time when you were quote unquote talent and then you shifted to entrepreneur. What's that story?
Well, what you don't know is I was always talent and I was always entrepreneur. So while I worked at Much Music, I had a record label and had written about 300 songs and had won Juno Awards. I also had a hat company because at the time, well, it still is, I'm not really great at fashion and getting all dolled up, and I couldn't do my hair. It was such a waste of time. So I started to wear hats. And I couldn't find the hats that I wanted. And so I found fashion students and we collaborated on a couple of, actually 3 collections of hats, which I sold all over Canada. I also did a lot of voice work and I hosted events around the country. I've always been entrepreneurial.
And where does that come from, Erica? I'd love
I
to
don't
know
know.
the story, because
I just like, I like to make something from nothing. I like to keep busy. I don't waste my time. I don't watch a lot of television. I don't drink. I don't party. I just like to do things that turn into something. And I think I just come up with ideas and actually make them happen. I mean, that's what separates those who dream and those who do. I have ideas. Everybody has ideas, but not everybody does the work to make those ideas come to life.
still in the spirit, on that same vein of the entrepreneurial journey, are there certain entrepreneurial influences that were really important to you? Are there certain books that you would share with new up and coming entrepreneurs? What are you reading right now? Love to hear your thoughts on that.
Well, there's 3 people. The entrepreneurial mentor really was my mom. My mom, when she was about 24, bought a summer camp with my dad in the middle of nowhere. It's still in the middle of nowhere. She bought it 40 odd years ago. So my parents were these freaky parents who raised their kids in a summer camp. And they just followed their dreams and made it happen. But my mom taught me something when I was around 8 years old. I was really hungry, time for supper, asked my mom to order pizza, and she refused. And she said that it was my turn to order the pizza, which of course I refused, stormed up to my room. We had a little bit of a Mexican standoff, and eventually I was so hungry, I came downstairs, I ordered the pizza, trembling voice, and the pizza guy took my order, delivered it. And while I was wolfing down the pizza, my mom said, "So, what did we learn?" I said, "Oh, pizza's so awesome." And she said, "No, actually, you need to learn to ask for what you want and don't be afraid to ask." So I was 8 years old when she told me that. And when I trace my career and every awesome thing that has happened in my life, I've made it happen. And I made it happen because I have the courage to walk up to people and ask for what I want. And when people say no to me, I don't take it personally. I think, okay, this isn't working out. Let me ask why. Why is this not working out? Let me learn something from this, or let me build a relationship with this person, because you never know. Down the road, that person may have something that would be right for me, or I may have something else that would be great for that person, and they'll already get to know me. So I understand the importance of asking for what you want, but also of building relationships and also being an opportunist. So when I think of the word opportunist, there is a negative connotation, especially when it comes to women who are opportunists. For me, the word opportunist means someone who is constantly looking for an opportunity for a mutually beneficial scenario. So when I see an opening, I'm in there, but I'm inviting the other person to come in with me. Let's do this. How can I help you? Do you want to participate? Let's make this happen. And that collaboration and the sense of community is what really has made every single one of my projects take off.
Erica, I'm sitting here and I'm absorbed by that whole idea of you never know, and why it's so wise to embrace the wisdom of uncertainty. It also makes me think about what I just looked up a few minutes before we even hopped on here, is you never know when you're going to do an interview in Seattle, and that is the one YouTube video that goes viral. Can you bring this full circle? You're face to face with Kurt Cobain, and it's a magnificent interview, but that spirit of you never know, I think, if I'm not mistaken, channeled its way through your conversation with the Nirvana frontman.
Well, I was not like that thrilled that I was interviewing him. Remember, I've interviewed bands for a decade. Some of them were fantastic and some of them were self-absorbed or not that interesting. So I had heard that he was really difficult. So we flew from Toronto to Seattle to do the interview. We were set up in a hotel room, which is the worst place to do a rock and roll interview because it looks sterile. It doesn't have the vibe. Anyway, I had a plan that the questions that I put together, as you know, you're an interviewer, Gare, so you understand that when you put together questions, you want to create questions that allows the other person to show their personality. And you don't want to ask people always the same questions because, especially at that time, he was doing one of those media tours where he, every half an hour, he's with another bunch of people who are asking him the same stupid questions. So my goal was to ask questions that would make him look at me, see me as a person, not as a media type. So he walked into the hotel room and I said, "Hey, my name's Erica. Would you like to do the interview on the bed or in the bed or on the balcony outside?" And he looked at me and he was very sort of shocked that I would ask him that. And he said, on the balcony, which is where that famous interview eventually took place. We set up the interview outside, but I wanted to sort of shock him. I wanted him to see me as a troublemaking person, if you will. The questions that I came up with for him were questions that I thought would be not the ones that most people would ask. I asked him about what he read. I asked him about why he would bring a child into the world when he was writing such dark, horrible songs about how much he hated life, etc. And he responded. You could see it in his eyes. He was like, she's asking me real questions about life. And he dropped his guard. And I think that's why people love that interview, is that I got the real person to talk. And the real person who's very guarded, the real person who usually has pat answers. The other thing was when he was talking, he would stop and I would listen and I would look and he would go, "Oh, she's still listening." And so he would talk more. And it's that second part of an answer, which is often the better part because it's even less pat than the original answer was. So those are sort of tricks of the trade that I picked up along the way. And it all came together beautifully in this interview that now is the #1 most requested video in terms of payment at Bell Media. They've earned the most money from being in movies or documentaries or other TV shows. Clips from that is the most requested. But what's interesting about that video is that someone stole the tape or something, copied the original tape. The actual interview is me talking to him. So he talks, I respond, and there's cutting back and forth. But someone stole just the tape of him. So my edits, my wonderful questions never got in. And for about 3 years on YouTube, people were saying, "Who is that person interviewing?" I'm like, "It's me." People started to go, "I think that's Erica Ehm. It sounds like her voice."
Well, I'm just picturing back. There's no way on a Seattle balcony you could have known that someday this would be all over YouTube. And that's why I love that, what you said earlier about how you never know where the opportunity is going to present itself. In that spirit, I remember you asking Kurt about his favorite book, and he mentioned Perfume. It's the book that he read and reread. What's your book, Erica? Now you've got me curious about what does Erica Ehm read and reread,
Well,
especially for entrepreneurial inspiration.
so it's funny because my mom, when I worked at Much Music, people would always assume that I was party girl. And my mom would chuckle to herself and she would say, "Why don't you ask Erica what she's reading?" So I've been in a book club for 16 years. I actually, when I was on Much Music, I had a book show called Between the Covers, where I would interview celebrities, which is where that clip would have been used, about what book they're reading. And then I compiled lists and I would mail them out to viewers who would request the Between the Covers book reading list. I read so many books. The one book that really has stuck with me in terms of informing me on how to grow my business was a book called Creativity by Ed Smulik, who is a founder of Pixar. And the one piece that, well, he talked a lot about how it's important for any business, not a creative business, but any business, to be creative in terms of the foundation, in terms of the management, in terms of the way you work with your staff, that you have to inspire them in many ways. But one of the things that he said that really stuck with me is he said that you need to be innovative all the time, especially when you're at the top of your game. Because when you think that you're the best, there's a whole bunch of wannabes who are starting out, who have been watching you the whole way up. And they're watching and saying, oh, they did this, they did that. I'm going to do the same thing, but I'm going to do it better. And we're going to be leaner and meaner, and we're going to take her down or take the company down. And it happened in my business. The same thing I watched when I started 14 years ago when I launched YMC, Yummy Mummy Club. We were the only game in town. I built it up, and then we were the only game in town. And then I started my agency, M&Co, and again, it was the only game in town. It was marketing to moms specifically. And then lots of these little agencies started popping up, and they called themselves influencer agencies. There was no such thing as an influencer. I was using moms and influential personalities to create branded content, but there wasn't a name called influencers. We had the YMC community, 500 parents, all who participated in our branded content. Someone called it influencer content, whatever, and all these little agencies started popping up. So what happened was, I'm still the king of the castle, but there are many other little villages that surround my castle right now, which take my market share. And that book warned me that it would happen, and they were right. Now, of course, I have to keep innovating to stay ahead of it. And that's the reality of running a business, is you can never relax because there's always someone right behind you.
And on that note, Erica, as we bring this to a close, I just think you've shared so many real pearls of wisdom as it relates to the striking of the balance between men and women at home, partners sharing the workload at home, as well as the idea of what opportunity now can look like. Mm-hmm. What is, in your view, what I call the better and bolder question that any entrepreneur needs to be asking right now?
What are you going to do differently? The world is now different. The world is not the same place as 3 months ago. Every single thing has changed. Most importantly, consumers. We are both consumers and business owners. We've changed. We see the world differently. We see people standing together in a group and we panic. 3 months ago, that was normal. The idea of having a job means something very different today. The idea of where we spend our money has completely changed. Anyone who was planning on traveling has now taken that family budget for family travel, for example, and plopped it into their home. And now people are looking at purchasing appliances and upgrading their homes and patio furniture and creating staycations and buying RVs so that they could travel around the area safely in their little bubble. If you are not asking yourself, what is my business going to be that is different than it was yesterday, you're going to be in trouble because the world is not the same as it was. And even if your product is still relevant, consumers are looking at it differently because their brains are now different. So what are you going to do differently?
Love it. Erica M. joining us. And, in many respects, Erica was a trailblazer in the world of influence even before that became a buzzword in terms of social media. But I think what Erica has shared with us is so valuable in these conversations that we're having here on Zoom, because what are you going to do differently does also speak to the sense that there is opportunity, and there's nothing wrong with being opportunistic as long as you're approaching it from a very ethical, from a very win-win kind of frame of mind. And hopefully some of these ideas from Erica will somehow find their way into what you're thinking and conceptualizing and dreaming about, as we all find ways to lead together and emerge stronger in these historic times.